for a lady?
Oh, of course, man, of course.
What's your... Yeah, now what is your technique?
I just, you got to be smooth about these things.
All right,
really.
let me make a note. Be smooth, okay.
That's it. Just be smooth.
Just be smooth.
Like the eels.
Like eels, just
clever.
be smooth. Listen, Stevie B, we've really appreciated you. And you know what? I've enjoyed your selection so much, and I've enjoyed you so much. I would love you to come on in future weeks and recommend another tune.
That'd be marvellous.
We've had some excellent listeners, but I don't know. There's something about Stevie B I like. I feel like he's going to get under my skin in a weird way. I'm like some kind of terrible creature from a foreign clime that maybe crawls up my urinary tract and climbs into... I don't know, something, but it's just... And I mean that, Stevie B, in the best possible sense.
Yeah, of course.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed for phoning in, Stevie B. Normally I would pit you against another listener, but we had another caller who was going to come on, Steve Crow, also called Steve. It would have got very confusing. And the Crow Man, we can't get hold of him.
Crowy.
The Crow Roaster. the Crow, yeah. Anyway, Steve Crow, the Crow, we can't get hold of, so it's a great shame. So therefore you win by default, and your choice of eels and lone wolf.
English language.
Before you go, Stevie B, were you listening earlier when we played one of a choice by both Dan and Harry?
I was, yes.
Remember they had played American Music Club and they played a track by Broadcast. I've never made a decision as to which one I preferred. Which one did you prefer?
Well, I think it's going to be Harry's.
It was Harry. It was American Music Club once again. He has
gone off him.
He's a nice guy.
Yeah, I don't like him so much.
He's a fan of Stevie B.
Sorry,
Listen,
Stevie B.
we have to move on, but thank you so much indeed for calling, and we will speak to you again hopefully very soon.
See you later, man.
Have a nice day. Cheers. And steady as she goes on the Steve Show, BBC6 Music. My name is Stephen Merchant. Thank you for listening, and thank you. I played that for Daniel Meadows, who's listening in Australia, the Gold Coast. He wonders if he's our regular Australian listener. Are you an Australian listener? Are you staying up until 1 a.m. in the morning to start listening to the show? Man alive, has a man not got to work? Oh, I imagine not, knowing the kinds of people we have listening to the show. Harry, I asked you earlier, I asked you, the listeners, earlier, is there any news on Chaz and Dave? I always get concerned about those boys.
Luckily we've had some news in from Kat. She's come in with the Chaz and Dave Rebs. Apparently they're both fine.
Brilliant.
They're both fine and well, in full health at the moment, and they're actually playing tonight in Glen Mavis or Glen Mavis.
Glen Mavis, I don't know.
Who knows?
I wonder if there's a Glen Mavis listener. Maybe they can pop along and check out the gig, see if it's still as dynamite as I imagine it would be.
I'd imagine they're great. I saw them a couple of years ago support the Libertines, and it was a great night.
Were they cracking?
Oh, they were fantastic.
Was this in the days before Libertines? That was obviously when they still had Doherty, was it?
Yeah.
Right, so this was before it all got a bit unpleasant.
Yeah, because I think Pete was a big fan of Chaz and Dave, so invited them along. They pulled out Snooker Loopy, all the favourites. It was amazing.
That must have been great. And were you watching it unironically? I would hope so.
I was just enjoying it for what it was. Rollicking fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, earlier we spoke to one of our listeners, Stevie B, was great. But we always like to normally pit our listeners against one another in a vague attempt to add a certain degree of drama to the show. We couldn't get our second listener on the line. In those emergencies, break open. Rufus, he's here.
Hey.
He's here. That's what
Stop
you do.
it. Listen, stop it.
No, I'll tell you this, Roof. You know, you came in a couple of weeks back. You dug us out of a hole when Harry was Oz way, and there's been a lot of feedback, a lot of response. I mean, it can't all be based on the fact that you are charming and smooth. It must also be because you're posh. And there's a lot of posh people out there, or at least a lot of fans of the posh.
I've got to tell you, Steve, I had a killer time getting here today because I was watching the beginning of the rugby. I'm sure we've got very few posh listeners today,
Sure.
because they'll be watching rugby like I should be.
Yeah.
At 3 o'clock kickoff, plus the beginning of the Steve Show, I had that thing of turning the radio up so I could hear the show and watch the TV in silent.
Sure.
Then when the national anthem came on, obviously, on the feet,
stood up, yeah.
on the feet, turn the radio off, telly up, say God Save the Queen. Then the French national anthem, Dinosaur Jr.
Perfect.
Because I turned the radio back
You
up.
won't want to listen to the French's tune. would you?
I can do that. So, and sat down again. Obviously, I will sit down for the French national anthem.
Of course, yeah.
So up, down, and then I jumped into a taxi and flew here.
Do you think that we would attract posh listeners such as yourself? And I know you can speak on behalf of the posh community.
Yeah,
Do you
the posh we call us.
Yeah, the posh. Would we attract more posh people if we played the national anthem at the beginning of the show?
I think. Well, I don't know what's happened to the old top of the hour national anthem.
Sure.
I don't know why that went, why it stopped. I think it's still played at close down.
Right.
I know BBC Six Music stops broadcasting at midnight.
Yes,
as
exactly.
a note of respect for the Queen,
yeah.
or something. But I think they should definitely play the national anthem at close down. Yeah.
Is that? I wonder if there's a kind of amazing, super groovy, funky tune, maybe done with guitars and drums. You know, something that's rock and roll, the sort of thing that maybe the Libertines might have recorded for an exclusive B-side or maybe a session.
Yeah, maybe an Elgar. I'll fish around in my tape collection and see if we can find something. Yeah,
it's worth just pointing out that that Dinosaur Jr. track in French is called Start Chopin. Cheers.
Round of applause to that.
Fantastic.
You know, it was a mediocre round of applause, and it deserved that. That's what it deserved. 'Cause it was It was lame, but it came, no, it was it was appreciated, and we thank you for it. We thank you for it. Rufus, what would you describe your clothes today? How would you describe them?
Well, Steve, I divide my wardrobe very much into urban and rural.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of people go for summer and winter or spring. I go for very trousers,
Yes.
a crisply ironed white shirt, a waistcoat, I believe, and a cravat.
yes, you did have a waistcoat.
Today I have trainers, white trainers,
Ooh.
new Carhartt jeans, a stripy jumper from Reese,
Yeah.
and a natty tatty little white t-shirt. So I've gone very much for urban today.
Yes.
Until I open my mouth and people see my floppy hair. That doesn't happen when I open my mouth. They see that already.
Sure.
But until that happens, I could be Street Boy Johnny. I could be anything.
Oh, Street Boy Johnny.
Street Boy
FBJ.
Johnny.
It's interesting that in your world this is considered street. This is considered street at some kind of yachting event in a P.G. Wodehouse novel. That's where it's considered urban.
Just my socks aren't even knee length. I can't believe it.
Are you a man? Do you own a pair of spats?
No, I've actually been looking for a pair. If any of the listeners know where I can get some,
pair of
64046.
Yeah, a pair of spats. Listen, we needed to will you in an effort to dig ourselves out of a hole because we didn't have. Well, firstly, we didn't have any personalities of our own or any interesting or droll observations to make. So
Or any
thank
class.
you for ticking
Yeah.
both of those boxes. But also because when I say one of our listeners dropped out and we needed to get you in. And last week, a couple of weeks back when you were on, you played an excellent choice. I'm hoping you'll play the same thing again. What was it?
Steve, I'd like to play a track called Like a Hobo.
That's the one. That's the one.
That's right, yeah. By a man called Charlie Winston. And it's a song that's, I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, Dan, didn't we? It's best enjoyed live. It's a very good live track, and it's a brilliant song.
Let's hear it again. Like a Hobo from Charlie Winston, the choice of super posh Rufus, who is with us again. I have to give people nicknames. I can't work unless people have got nicknames, which I imagine is something that the upper classes do all the time.
Well, stereotypes are such a time saver, Steve. That's what I always say.
Exactly. We were asking, we were putting the call out there, where can Rufus get a pair of spats? No gentleman really is feeding himself unless he's wearing a decent pair of spats. And Rufus is no exception. Have we had any feedback?
We've had a really helpful listener, actually. I can't remember who it was. Someone's emailed in with a few eBay links to some spats. Turns out there are 72 different spats available on eBay at the moment, including fur spats. This is from Phil Dodd Esquire. Phil Dodd Esquire.
Excellent.
So thank you, Phil, for sending us. You can get fur spats, you can get, gangster spats, gangster fancy dress spats. I just want a pair of gentleman's 30s spats. I don't really want fancy dress spats. I want spats.
Sure.
That would be ridiculous.
Do you think
Yeah.
there's people listening who perhaps, because we've got a lot of young listeners, are they thinking, what the hell are they talking about? Do young people know what spats are?
I don't know if they
It
do.
worries me. Do you know what? I tell you this, it worries me because there are so many things which are from the classic period, things which I imagine your father and your forefathers did, which are dying out. For instance, the smoking of the pipe. Now,
know.
leaving aside the crack pipe, which I know is extremely popular with many of our listeners, I mean specifically the classic pipe, the Holmesian pipe.
Yes.
And I'm worried that, you don't see the young youths of today hanging out on bus shelters smoking pipes.
I know.
Who is going to smoke a pipe? Unless people start doing it, it's going to die out.
Yeah.
The pipe is
Why
gonna-
don't we do the Gentleman's Minute, like we talked about, Steve, all those years ago? I come on the radio once a week and I do a minute on the old art, the dying art of the dandy.
Sure,
That's what I'll call
sure.
it. And we talk about stuff like that.
Well, we have a mutual friend, Mike, who I know said once that if he ever won a considerable sum on the lottery, he'd like to work single-handedly to bring back the wearing of the cape. as a kind of casual fashion accessory. And I think I would look great sweeping into a room with a large cape. A sort of, a kind of combination of Sherlock Holmes and Dracula. You know what I mean? I think you
Yeah.
can make a real statement with
I love the idea that with a large amount of money you could change what people wore.
Yeah.
It's just a really weird idea.
But also, because not only is the Sherlock Holmes-esque pipe dying out, but also the sort of the thin sort of white pipe, the little clay pipe.
Oh,
that
yeah,
you perhaps see,
yeah.
Sort of a yokel
Yes.
smoking.
Yeah.
They're also dying out.
Yeah.
And of course, the moustache.
Yeah.
The moustache, you just don't see the moustache anymore.
I had one for 7 months, didn't I, Steve?
You did indeed when
saw
you
it?
were acting in a
Yeah,
play.
that's right. I was doing
And
a play
you look
for the
very
Festival
good.
Ball. Thank
But I'd like to see, I was thinking of sporting, because I don't think I could grow the big kind of Jimmy Edwards bushy moustache, but I'm thinking about one of those sort of thin Fu Manchu, sort of oriental moustaches that just droops down like a long shoelace over your top lip.
With a cape.
Wearing a cape, yeah. If that doesn't attract the ladies, nothing will. But there are so many things which we should perhaps use our influence here as broadcasters to.
That's right.
to
We
revive.
don't have a lot of money, but we do have a radio station.
We do have a radio station.
show.
A radio show,
We don't have
yeah.
the whole station.
One thing at a time. I work my way in, and then I take over. So, listen, each week we like to play a cover version because I'm a big collector of classic cover songs, and we've really got to pit you two guys against it because Harry originally came up with the jingle for it, which, if you'll remind us again, Harry, was what?
Mr. Cover.
Mr. Cover. Always had a slightly racist overtone, I thought. Rufus, of course, came in a couple of weeks back. You changed that. You took that that on, and you made it into what?
Mr. Coverman, Stevie.
So I don't know which I don't know which one I prefer, but either way, here's our cover choice today. OK Go with a cover of an old Zombies track. This will be our year. If you're not familiar with OK Go, they're the ones, of course, that did that intricately choreographed dance in their pop video on treadmills. And that song is taken from a compilation which is worth digging out. It was put together in 2004 by, among others, Spike Jones, or Johns, never sure how to pronounce his name. And it's called The Future Soundtrack of America, and it's got artists on there like Death Cab for Cutie, R.E.M., Bright Eyes, Clem Snide, Elliott Smith, all sorts of people on there, so it's worth digging out. Back shortly with more choices from Dan and Harry. Man alive. If that doesn't make you listen, then nothing will. Harry, it's your time again to choose another choice for us on the Steve Show 6 Music with me, Stephen Merchant. What have you got for us?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I've got some Husker Du for you. This is from their last album, which I think was in '87. A little bit of musical history for you. Without Husker Du, you wouldn't have had the Pixies. Without the Pixies, you wouldn't have had Nirvana. Without Nirvana, you wouldn't have had Stiltskin. without Stiltskin's singer, Genesis couldn't have carried on without Phil Collins. Now they've got him back, it's all okay. So basically, you've got Husker Du to thank for Phil Collins rejoining Genesis. But this is a splendid track off their final album. It's called Could You Be the One?
Husker Du, Could You Be the One? It's a great choice, and obviously the Do we deeply respect. For super posh people listening, Rufus, what's the current information with the rugby? In case people are trying to, like you, choose between listening to the show or watching the rugby.
Or doing as I did, and having the radio on full blast and the TV on silent.
Exactly.
France are now ahead 18-15.
Okay, is that important?
Well, it's important that we're losing.
Right, why is it?
Because France are probably going to win the Six Nations.
Damn the French! Okay.
Sorry to any French listeners.
No, well, indeed, yes. Sacre bleu. That's the extent of my French. I also know, tu aimes la musique pop? Oui. And I also know, où est le syndicat d'initiative? Where is the Tourist Information Bureau? Sadly, I don't understand the answers to either of those questions. So, if you are French and you're listening, text us in 64046. Tell us what it's like to be a Frenchie.
What is it like?
We listened to Husker Du, we enjoyed that. Dan, of course, now has to come up with a selection, and for regular listeners, you will know that Dan, with today's result as well earlier on, you have not yet once won this battle of
Harry
music choices.
he's very much France to my England. I've got no chance now. I can draw at best.
Sure.
And I think I might be able to do it, Steve.
Okay.
But then I say that every week.
Sure.
And I never do. But we've got a song by the experimental pop band. You may not be aware of them.
No.
A little bit obscure. They're from Bristol. Hometown reference.
I've turned my back on that town, Dan. I'm never going back.
Well, maybe they'll change your mind. What can I tell you about them? Despite the name, not particularly experimental. What we had from Harry was a great slice of American rock. This is a great slice of English power pop rock, and it's called Hard Enough.
Dan's second choice, experimental pop band. And what was it called?
It's called Hard Enough.
Hard Enough. That was up against Husker Du, Harry's choice with Could You Be the One. Leave aside your love of Harry, leave aside your adoration for Husker Du. I need you, the listeners, to make that decision, because Dan has yet to win. 64046, Stephen.6music at bbc.co.uk.
Just a sympathy vote. That'll do for me. I don't mind.
Which tune makes it onto the Steve Show playlist? You decide. 64046. We have to rush because the news is fast approaching. Oh, I love that phrase. Each week we like to compile a Songs to Seduce Women by CD. It's a CD of Songs to Seduce Women by. And this song speaks for itself. If it's not on the Seduction CD, then nothing should be. Minnie Riperton, Inside My Love, a song to seduce a woman by, if ever there was one. I don't know, is there something rude about the lyrics? You can see inside me, will you come inside me, do you want to ride inside my love? Is that rude, or is that merely...
Mike Reid would have refused to have played it.
He would have slammed it. Reedy would have hated it. Listen, we have to go to the news. After that, we'll be catching up with Dave the Walker as he approaches the final stretch of his mammoth walk, plus another of Richard's fiendishly difficult music questions. Here's the news. From 1980, that's American power pop band The Romantics and What I Like About You, which is something of a new wave standard in the States, and it pops up on TV adverts and on the radio and stuff, but it's sort of largely unknown over here, so I thought it was an interesting one to spin. Each week we've been catching up with Dave, an old pal of mine who is, for no very good reason, walking from Land's End to John O'Groats. He is surely now approaching the finishing line, and we speak to him now. Dave, where are you, my friend?
Oh, where am I? I can almost see the finishing line, Steve. 1,100 miles gone. I'm at the seaside for the first time in, 50-odd days. I'm at a place called Dornoch on the east coast of
Dornoch?
Scotland. Yeah.
That's a beautiful name for a town, isn't it?
It's lovely, isn't it? Apparently Madonna was married here, but they've tied it up since then.
Oh, of course, I remember that. The news people from around the world descended, presumably on door knock.
Yeah. Still some blood on the walls. But
Where do we find you as we speak? Where are you? Where are you?